It took place in Suffolk, close to the seaside. Nearby, there's a tall red house that was probably built around 1770. Behind it is a little, messy garden, and the sea is visible from the front windows. This solitary house is surrounded by tall, shadowy trees. A sign beside the front door indicates this was originally a public house where guests might stop for food and sleep. A young student named Thomson from Cambridge University came to the house one lovely spring day. He desired some time to read and study in a serene and comfortable setting. At that time, the house was rented out to Mr. and Mrs. Betts, who welcomed him warmly. They assigned him a first-floor room that was spacious and had a nice view out the window. He led a peaceful life, working every morning, taking midday walks across the countryside, and ending his days with an evening drink at a pub with a few locals before retiring for the night. He was content to live this way for the entire month. One afternoon, while walking along a different path, Thomson noticed a large white object in the distance. As he approached it, he saw it was a big square stone with a square hole in the center. After examining the stone, he took a moment to take in the view, the sea, distant cathedrals, and a few houses with windows occasionally lit by the sun. Then he resumed his stroll. That night in the pub, he inquired about the purpose of the white stone. Mr. Betts stated, "It's been there for a very long time since, before any of us were born." Another man remarked, "People used to say it brought bad luck, that it was unlucky for fishing." When Thomson asked why, the patrons fell silent, clearly unwilling to discuss it further. Thomson was perplexed. A few days later, Thomson decided to spend the afternoon studying at home. Around 3 o'clock, feeling the need for a break, he decided to explore the other rooms on his floor. He stood up and tiptoed out of his room into the hallway. The house was empty and silent, except for the buzzing of flies. It was scorching outside with the sun beaming in. He entered 3 tidy and attractive rooms near his own bedroom. Then he tried to enter the southwest room, but found it locked. Curious, he took the keys to all the other doors on the floor and attempted to unlock it. When he eventually succeeded, he opened the door and stepped inside. The room was bright and hot, with 2 windows facing south and west. The bed was the only object in the corner. There were no rugs or photographs. The room wasn't particularly interesting, but suddenly, Thomson turned and bolted from the room, slamming the door shut behind him. Someone was in there, in the bed. He nearly yelled. The entire body was covered in covers, but it was still alive because it moved. Thomson knew he wasn't dreaming. It was a lovely, bright day. He was at a loss for what to do. First, he needed to lock the door again, but not before listening. There was silence throughout the room. Even with his best efforts to turn the lock silently, he produced some noise. He abruptly stopped when he noticed someone approaching the door. He turned and dashed down the hallway to his room, shutting and locking the door behind him. He listened and waited. Maybe this person can walk through doors and walls, he thought. But nothing happened. His initial thought was to get out of the house as quickly as possible, but he knew that Mr. and Mrs. Betts would find out if he changed his plans. Furthermore, if they continued to reside in the property despite knowing about the person in the locked room, there was undoubtedly nothing to fear. Perhaps it would be best to remain silent. That seemed the simplest thing to do. Thomson stayed for another week, never again approaching the door, but often stopping in the hallway to listen. Still, there was nothing. Too terrified to ask anyone in the village about the locked chamber, his curiosity grew as the week ended. He decided to investigate before leaving. His plan was to check the room one last time before catching the train at 4 o'clock, with his horse and bags waiting outside. That's what he did. "I'll just take a last look upstairs to make sure I have all my things," he told Mr. Betts, loading his luggage onto the horse. He thanked Mrs. Betts and hurried up the stairs, opening the door with as much silence as possible. He nearly burst out laughing. "It's not a real person. What a fool I was," he thought. It was just a heap of worn-out clothing. As he turned to leave, something unexpected moved behind him. He spun around to see the heap of rags approaching him, dried blood down its shirt and a knife embedded in its jacket. With haste, he opened the door and ran out. He fell down the staircase, and everything went dark. When he opened his eyes, Mr. Betts stood over him holding a tumbler filled with a strong drink. He appeared irritated. "Mr. Thomson, sir, you ought not to have done that. After all our kindness, it was a foolish thing to do. If you tell anyone what you've seen, no one will want to live in this house," he declared. "I apologize. I won't tell anyone," Thomson promised. Before he departed, Mr. and Mrs. Betts informed him of their knowledge. A wealthy gentleman once resided here. One evening, he was ambushed by several men while walking through the village. They killed him with a knife while holding him down on that large white stone you noticed. His body was thrown into the water. Subsequently, villagers moved the stone farther from the settlement, claiming that fish wouldn't come near it. The previous owners of this house advised us to lock that bedroom, but leave the bed in place because the ghost of the man would return to spend more time here. Since we've been here, you're the first to see him. But please, don't tell anyone. We don't want people talking about ghosts in this house. I know Thomson's story because he visited my family years later. Thomson kept quiet about what happened in the Betts Suffolk home for a long time. When we reached the bedroom, he opened the door loudly and halted outside. Before entering, he meticulously scanned the room. Then he remembered I was standing there and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, my dear. I once experienced something really strange." And he related to me the tale I just told you.
Yeah.